Hi, take four. Happy Sabbath. This morning I was watching a video from Pastor Bear at Bear Independent, and I'll post a link in the comments to this, or in the description of the specific video he posted, where he's talking about specifically Daniel 3 and 4. And I took away something very different from what he was saying on one point, and I just kind of wanted to share that with you. Now, for my background, I've said this a few other times, I was raised in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which sprang out of the Millerite movement in the 1800s. And kind of one core thing of William Miller's interpretation of prophecy was this day for a year concept. So he thought one day in Bible prophecy translated to 1 year of real time. Like one full rotation of the earth around the sun was what 1 year in biblical prophecy was. And honestly, I was looking up some timelines earlier, and even then, I think you have to have a year be 360 days instead of 365.2419 days. The actual rotation of the Earth around the sun does not happen to coincide perfectly with the spinning of the Earth on its axis. So that's why you have all sorts of special rules about leap years in the Gregorian calendar that we all use now. But the core fundamental piece of William Miller's teachings was based around this day for a year interpretation. And that's still very common in the Adventist Church. Most of Doug Batchelor's sermons and presentations about how to interpret Revelation are based on that. And just very quickly, let me stop talking and open a Bible. Don't mind the notes behind me. I just needed to write this all down so I could reference it while I was recording the video. So let's quickly flip over to Ezekiel chapter 4. This is kind of one of the sources for that days a year. I should put bookmarks in my Bible so I'm not fumbling on camera. Sorry, I'm just going to say random things to fill the space as I'm flipping these pages. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 4. Oh, let's just start at verse 1. So this is God, the Lord, Yahweh, whatever translation you want to use speaking. I'm reading out of the NIV. I checked this in the King James, the New King James, before I started recording the video on pretty much all of these references. It's very similar. So follow along with whatever version of the Bible you happen to have handy. But please follow along. Anyways, Ezekiel 4:1. Now, son of man, take a block of clay, put it in front of you, and draw the city of Jerusalem on it. Then lay siege to it, erect earthworks against it, build a ramp up to it, set up camps against it, and battering rams around it. So here we've got God telling the prophet Ezekiel to draw the city of Jerusalem on a piece of block and build up this massive panorama miniatures of supposedly the city under siege. Then take an iron pan and place it in an iron wall between you and the city, and turn your face toward it. It will be under siege, and you shall besiege it. This will be a sign to the people of Israel. Okay, he's basically playing with Micro Machine toys. Verse 4, this is where it's important. Then lie on your left side and put the sin of the people of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sins for the number of days that you lie on your side. I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days you will bear the sin of the people of Israel. After you have finished this, you will lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sins of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. If you're not familiar with it, Israel and Judah actually split very early during the reign of David. After a rebellion, he came back, and two tribes met him, and they started partying. The other 10 tribes came back later, and were like, why did you start the party without us? And that actually caused a split from the Israelites. formed 2 countries, with the 2 tribes forming the country of Judah and the remaining 10 tribes forming the country of Israel. So that's why Israel and Judah are split here. But you can kind of see that idea of a day for a year. But it's worth noting here, this is not in prophecy. He's literally told to basically play with children's toys and sleep in front of it for 430 days. He is physically laying on the ground in front of this replica of the city of Jerusalem under siege for over a year. Or at least he's told to. It doesn't say right in there if he did it, but he was instructed by God. And he was instructed to do this physical action, not prophetic action. This isn't a vision, well, sort of prophetic, but it's not a vision he's seeing. It's just instructions he's being told to follow. Let's jump over to Numbers chapter 14 for another example of this. Numbers, yes, I wrote down my page, Numbers. Okay, Numbers 14, verse 34. This, for background, Numbers, this is after the Israelites left Egypt, before they formed a country. They're wandering around in the wilderness. Really, they're just moving from the country that was then Mitzrayim to the area, southern Canaan, that we now refer to as the Levant, or frankly modern Israel. They were told to send spies in to scout out before the invasion. The spies came back and said it's horrible, we shouldn't invade, the people are too strong. And anyways, Numbers 14, verse 43. For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins and know what it is like to have me against you. So this is kind of what the other common excuse or justification for this year for a day interpretation of prophecy. So the scouts went into Canaan. They searched for 40 days and came back and said, no, we can't take it. The Canaanites are too strong. And Yahweh's reaction to this was to say that since you weren't willing to go in, you're going to be punished wandering around the desert for 40 years, 1 day for each day, or 1 year for each day the spies were active, or scouts, whatever you want to call them, were active in Canaan. Once again, this is not a vision, this is not a prophecy, this is God giving instructions. And what a lot of interpretations, and I haven't done my homework on this enough before recording the video, a lot of people will say that this was to allow the generation of adult Israelites who had left Egypt to basically die of old age, and the next generation would get to invade Canaan. Across that 40-year period. I'm not going to flip over to it right now, but in Genesis 29 is also, some groups will use that as justification for this. What happens there is a man is told he needs to work 7 years before getting married. The husband of the bride kind of pulls a trick on him, so when he gets married, he actually marries the older sister instead of the younger sister that he was working for. And then he's told, work another 7 years and we'll marry the other one. So, work another 7 years for the other one, but you can marry her now. And in that, there is a week-long wedding feast. And some people will see the 7 years of working and the 7 days of the wedding feast and try to use this day for a year representation, but there's nothing in the actual text that justifies it. It was literally 7 years of this guy working as a shepherd at the time, working in the field, taking care of sheep for 7 calendar years, and then he was having a wedding feast, giant party, for 7 days. It doesn't. None of that was in a vision. Now, where this day for a year kind of gets applied most of the time, at least coming from the Millerite interpretations, is in Revelation. Now, if we flip to Revelation 12, just giving a couple examples of where this is frequently used. Revelation 12, verse... Oh, hey, that's handy. Revelation 12:6, the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. And then we've got Revelation 12:14. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into a place to prepare for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time. Now, if you that was a time, times, let me use my fingers, a time, 1, times, plural, so at least 2, and half a time, so 3.5. A lot of interpretations will see that as 3.5 times, meaning 3.5 years. And if we switch over to Revelation 11:2. Oh, actually, so I'd say page. Let's go to Revelation 13:5 first. The beast was given a month to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to explore its authority for 42 months. 42 months, 12 months in a year, 12 times 3, 36, plus a half year, 42. So your times time and half a time, and 42 months come out to be about the same amount of time. That previous verse I looked at where it said 1,260 days, that would come out to 3.5 years if there are 360 days in a year. So that's a little different. Let's see, what do I have else? Revelation 11, verse 2, but exclude the utter court, do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample the holy city for 42 months, and I will appoint, verse 3, and I will appoint 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And in verse 9, for 3.5 days, some from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. So the common interpretations here, at least the versions I grew up with, was this 42 days was a period from the decree to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. The Babylonians conquered Israel and Judah, destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, and then about 80 years later, after that invasion, they okayed rebuilding Jerusalem, including the temple. If you look, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah talk a lot about that rebuilding process and the instructions to go build that. Those 2 books actually mostly overlap in timeline. But people will interpret that 42 months as starting then and ending with the heavenly. The original Millerite claim was that Jesus would return to earth at the end of that period. The later claims were that there's a sanctuary in heaven that was being cleaned at the end of that period. But let's get to the meat of this. Flip over to Daniel. I should have written a page number on there, but I didn't. Okay. Ezekiel. So just for background on what's going on in Daniel, the Babylonians had just conquered Israel and Judah. The Babylonian conquest of Judah happened about 598 to 586 BC. And then when they conquered Judah, and that's actually talked about in, if you read Jeremiah, some of that's covered there. Once again, Jeremiah and Daniel also overlap timelines a little. Anyways, the Babylonians conquered Israel, and they took captives out of some of the nobility and the highborn people. Basically, the children of the elite were taken back to Babylon and trained to be advisors for the Babylonians. Honestly, I think some of the idea here is that if the elite people were successful and very skilled, their kids will probably be successful and very skilled. So let's take their kids and put that genetic potential for being really skilled and useful to work for us. So a lot of the Israelite kids, including Daniel, were taken to Babylon. And this is where you get the Daniel and the Lion's Den stories, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, all that. But skip over to Daniel 4. King Nebuchadnezzar I'm going to read the whole thing and just point out a few things as we go through this. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the nations and peoples of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. So one of the interesting things is this is actually being written by King Nebuchadnezzar. So this is a pagan king writing what is now in the Christian Bible. Kind of interesting. Anyways, verse 3, how great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, content and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in bed, images and visions passed through my mind and terrified me. So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. When the magicians, enchanters, astrologists, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it. Honestly, one of my takeaways from this, and I know I'm going off topic here, is I kind of wonder if world leaders still have dreams, prophetic dreams like this from God. Like, is Putin having dreams? Is Biden having dreams? I can't remember the name of the guy in charge of China. But like, I kind of wonder if major presidents and prime ministers are actually having prophetic dreams from God now. They may not be saying it, but I kind of wonder if it's really happening still. Okay, back on track. Verse 8. Finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods in him. Yeah, all of these Hebrew kids, when they got thrown to Babylon, were given Babylonian names. So Daniel is the Hebrew name, Belshazzar is the Babylonian name he was given. Verse 9. I said, Belshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here's my dream, interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. Pause here. I just want to point out that this is a vision that he dreamed. So it's a vision. Like, this is not someone taking actions on earth. This is not somebody working. This is not somebody laying on their side. This is a vision. Which interestingly, so is most of Revelation. If we read, you want to look into that more. Anyways, verse 11. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From it, every creature was fed. In the visions I saw while lying in bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger coming from heaven. Now, frequently that term messenger will also get translated to angel. The terms are pretty much interchangeable. He called in a loud voice, "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter the fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. Let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal till 7 times pass for him." So, just want to highlight there, the last phrase, till 7 times pass for him. So we've got times time and half time mentioned in Revelation, along with the 42 months, which seems to be about the same thing. And right here you have 7 times being identified as a period. Till 7 times pass by for him. The decision is announced by the messengers of the holy ones, declare the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms on the earth, and gives them anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. This is the dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belshazzar, tell me what it means, for none of the wise men in my kingdom can interpret it for me, but you can, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Kind of interesting, like, the plurality there, because King Nebuchadnezzar is referring to Daniel/Belshazzar as having the spirit of the holy gods, plural, not the holy god, singular. But at the same time, Nebuchadnezzar was a pagan king. He believed in a large number of gods. Okay, moving on to verse 19. Then Daniel, also called Belshazzar, was greatly perplexed at the time, and his thoughts terrified him. So the king said, "Belshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you." Belshazzar answered, "My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree which you saw, which grew great and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing..." Sorry, my watch is beeping. "Providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your Majesty, you are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to the distant parts of the earth. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven and saying, 'Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field while its roots remain in the ground.'" If you want some more perspective on that bound with iron and bronze, I recommend you check out Pastor Bear's video. He used to cut trees and sell firewood as a kid, so he's got a lot more experience with trees and the meanings of those kind of things than I do. Anyways, continuing on. "Let him be drenched with the dew of the heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him. This is the interpretation, Your Majesty, and this is the decree of the Most High has issued against Lord the King." I should just briefly back up and highlight that in verse 23. You also have the phrase, "until 7 times pass by for him." So we've got that 7 times again. Okay, verse 25. "You will be driven away from the people and will live with the wild animals. and you will eat grass like an ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times, again, 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms on the earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that the kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, your majesty, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that your prosperity will continue. Verse 28. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon, he said, "Is not the great Babylon that I have built as the royal residence in my mighty power for the glory of my majesty?" Even as the words were on his lips, a voice came down from heaven. "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken away from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like an ox 7 times. Again, for those of you following along, I'm in verse 32. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms of the earth and gives them to anyone he wishes." Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like an ox. His body was drenched with dew by heaven until his hair grew like feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. Verse 34, "At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the people of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the people of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?' At the same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride he is able to humble." Now, one thing I found kind of interesting is Nebuchadnezzar is given this vision there, and he's told he'll basically go insane for a period of 7 times. And historically, from 582 BC to 575 BC, a period of 7 years, there's no records of governmental happenings in Babylon for that 7-year period during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. It's just completely, the historical record is completely silent. It seems like nothing happened for those 7 years, which would be kind of consistent. It's also worth noting that this is identified as a period in a vision, in a prophecy, as being a period of 7 times, which turns into 7 literal calendar years, the 582 BC to 575 BC. Remember, BC times are negative. They count down towards 0, but there's actually no year 0. So the 582 BC was older than the 575 BC, even though it's a higher absolute value number. I know it's a little confusing to me. And this all happened, the conquest of Jerusalem was, or conquest of Israel was 598 BC to 586 BC, so this insanity happened 4 years after he finished conquering Israel. But we have this 7 times identified here in Daniel, meaning 7 literal years. So I find the interpretation now in Revelation of times time and half a time, 3.5 times. I struggle with the idea of that being actually a day for a year. Because if that was a day for a year, what's 7 times 365 and change? I should have had a calculator already. Okay. Calculator. I had a computer next to me. Okay, 7 times 365.24. Did I put that wrong? 365.24. That would come out to about 2,555 years. Now, if we apply that day for a year approach to the 7 years of insanity that King Nebuchadnezzar had starting in 585 BC, 582 BC, that comes out to ending in 1975 AD. Clearly, this dude's kingdom in Babylon, which is now Iraq, was not ruled by King Nebuchadnezzar in 1975. Like, we've got historical records. There was no King Nebuchadnezzar ruling a kingdom of Babylon in 1975. So you definitely can't apply the year for a day principle to this prophecy. And if this prophecy, which has already been fulfilled 2,500 years ago, a little over, I kind of am now finding it kind of questionable to be able to apply the year for a day interpretation of biblical prophecy to the prophecies given in vision in Revelation. Because all of the examples I've got of a day for a year being used were all somebody taking they were either the Israelites being punished for 1 year for every day that they disobeyed, or their invasion of Canaan was delayed for 1 year for every day that the scouts had been there. But none of that's in a vision. That's how God told them to behave and delay their invasion. None of that was in vision. And then you've got Ezekiel laying on his side for 1 day per year of disobedience. But once again, it's not in vision. It's literally a dude laying on his side in front of some toys that... Toys is really the wrong words, but things he had put together on the ground to represent Israel being besieged. But it's not a vision. And then if you look at Genesis, with that story of Jacob marrying Laban's daughters, Leah and Rachel, he's working for 7 years and then having a wedding feast for 7 days. But nowhere in that is that a vision. It's just at the time they're wedding feasts for people in their positions, because these guys were not like low-level servants. They had massive flocks. They were rich men. That was just how they did things. Your wedding feast lasted a week. It doesn't seem to apply that week for a year prospect to interpreting prophecy. Like, no matter whether you want to use the 3.5 times, the 42 months versions, because there's a lot of different timelines or different time periods identified in Revelation. Some of them 3.5 years, some of them actually 3.5 days, and some of them not quite 3.5 years with the 1,260 days. It's close, but not quite. But I'm just finding we've got examples in prophecy of the day of a prophetic year, meaning a real literal calendar year. And all of the examples I can find of a day for a year don't seem to really hold up. And the reason I say they don't hold up is because none of them are prophetic. They're all physical examples, but none of them are in visions given by God. Anyways, hope it was interesting. I'd love to see your comments and take on this, so yeah, leave comments. Actually appreciate the discussion and other perspectives.